Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network begins in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show begins in 5 seconds.
Morning, glory, America, bonjour, hi, Canada, greetings, everyone in Israel who are listening, and to my listeners in the People's Republic of China. Good morning to you. I don't think it's a good idea that President Xi endorsed Carrie Lam yesterday, but I don't get to advise China on how to run Hong Kong. They really just ought to let it alone and let it make money for everybody, which is what it's been doing for 100 plus years. Good morning. There's so much going on. There are riots all across Iraq, mobs in Baghdad. You know who they're running against? Iran. And internet services down as the government huddles in the old green zone trying to figure out what to do because the Iraqi people do not want the Iranian mullahs running their lives. Terrible story out of Mexico. At least 9 members of a Mormon family ambushed and killed by organized crime there. We're getting out of the Paris Climate Agreement. That's good. The Brits have a new speaker. John Bercow is gone. That's great news. One of my favorite Brits, Jacob Rees-Mogg, made a terrible error, He wasn't making light of the Grinnell Towers fire. He was perhaps insensitive to the victims. He's apologized deeply. But Boris Johnson has put out just a brilliant ad. I want you to listen to the audio of this. This is why he is a formidable candidate. Boris Johnson's ad on Twitter today, I put it out to just basically frame his campaign on as it gets underway. Cut number 28.
We get on with serving the people of this country. For hope. Hospitals that are finally getting the investment to match the devotion of the staff. Schools where standards of reading are rising through the use of synthetic phonics. Police colleges where idealistic young men and women are enrolling in large numbers now to fight crime across the country. Let's get Brexit done and let's bring this country together.
Okay, did you hear the 5 messages? Hospitals, where great people work. That's nurses and doctors. Schools, where we're using synthetic phonics, meaning it's a play to the traditionalists. You know, if we just get back to doing the 3 R's we can get, plus a promise of funding. Then police, which everyone in Great Britain knows they need more of because of the jihadi threat that remains high there, even though they lowered the alert level yesterday. And get Brexit done and move on with bringing the country together. Everyone would like that. The United Kingdom would actually just like to grow a lot for a while and just get out of this 10 years of nightmarish gridlock. First with Gordon Brown, then with Theresa May, David Cameron winning a big vote and throwing it away on a Brexit vote that he didn't implement but quit. It's just been a nightmare for the people of Great Britain. Boris Johnson is a happy-go guy. He's a happy warrior. And that makes a big difference in a campaign. That is going to be great. Now, talk about happy warriors. If you didn't see Donald Trump, and you probably didn't if you watch mainstream media, that Kentucky well, first let's do the Washington Nationals go to the White House yesterday. And for 2 days, it's full of, there's one guy on the Nationals. I can't remember. I don't care about the National League. I only care about the Indians. But their closer doesn't want to go to the White House. Okay, so they talk about that, and they talk about he hates Trump. And the impression grows that the Nationals don't like Trump. Well, the Nationals get to the White House. Turns out a bunch of them love Trump. Their catcher puts on a MAGA hat. Trump hugs him. The internet melts down. And then Ryan Zimmerman, their star third baseman, does this. Cut number 14.
Mr. President, me and my teammates, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having us here. Thank you. This is an incredible honor that I think all of us will never forget. And we'd also like to thank you for keeping everyone here safe in our country. And continuing to make America the greatest country to live in the world.
Oh my gosh. Now, they gave him, at that point, Zimmerman gives him a Trump jersey. And Twitter is already melting down, but when the catcher hugs him, or when the president hugs the catcher putting on a MAGA hat, I about had a heart attack laughing. Because I knew what would happen, and in fact, it did happen. People went berserk. The Trump derangement syndrome people went berserk online, and it was just amusing as hell to watch. Then last night, the president goes down to Kentucky, and he gives every Democrat a heart attack. I got to play this 3 times today if I play it at all. Cut number 20 is a minute and a half of Trump audio from the Kentucky rally last night that Matt Bevin, the governor's, and get up, Louisville, get up and go out and vote for Matt Bevin right now. Because he's a good governor, and we need him in there, and everyone's pulling on the same oar, and they got to send a message from Kentucky about the Trump base, which is rock solid, by the way, rock solid. Listen to this, cut number 20.
And we're supporting our police. We're rebuilding our military. We're defeating radical Islamic terrorists like never before. The monstrous animal known as al-Baghdadi is dead. And the man that took his place is dead also. American Special Forces gave the world's #1 terrorist a one-way ticket to hell.
All right. Listen, that goes on and on. That goes on and on. I'll play some more audio of the president in a minute. I just got to tell you, if you're a Trump derangement syndrome person, you're beginning to realize that half the country loves him and maybe 45% of the country hates him. And you're playing for the 15% in the middle. So it's probably 45-10 right now. There's a little bit of what used to be called colloquially the Bradley syndrome. Tom Bradley was supposed to win a governor's race in California. He didn't. People put it down to an unwillingness to say they didn't want to vote for him because they thought they would be judged racist because he was African-American. And so the, quote, Bradley effect, which has been disparaged by many good academics, I don't know if it existed or not, I do think there's a Trump effect. It's just it's not worth the heat in some places to stand up and say, I kind of like this guy. He's a disruptor. I don't like his tweets. I don't like some of his slam bang politics, but he's getting some stuff done. People he underpolls. He just does. He just underpolls. Let me tell you, though, about what Ryan Saavedra has posted. He works for Ben Shapiro. Quote, what James O'Keefe's Project Veritas is dropping here in a few hours is probably the most explosive video they've ever released. Buckle your seatbelt and grab the popcorn. Now, this is one of those, end of quote. Oh, really? Because they've released some pretty explosive videos before. Remember the Planned Parenthood takedown? Now, they've screwed up before, too, so I'm going to wait and see, but Ryan is a pretty reliable reporter. Meanwhile, Dwayne came in today. If I had a producer, I would know what was going on. But Dwayne wandered in today like Eeyore coming out of the forest. And
we know what it's going to be on.
Oh, you're awake.
Yes.
Good. First time along. So what's it going to be about?
It is going to be an expose on the death of Epstein.
But they were their latest thing was on CNN. Is it part of the CNN leak about talking about Epstein?
I do not believe so. I think they now have inside information as to the final hours of the life of Jeffrey Epstein, and what has been reported is not apparently what they've concluded.
You know, there's zero interest in the part of the department. This attorney general would not conceal. I'm going to be very skeptical.
I understand.
Hold your fire, America.
I'm just saying.
I hate conspiracy theories. I ain't going to go down that road. I'll watch it. But I until it's completely vetted, I'm not going to touch it. By the way, if you're banking on John Durham, the U.S. attorney in Connecticut, bringing in indictments against Hunter Biden, don't. He's going to go where the law leads him. There's a great piece yesterday by Jim Garrity, Gary the Indispensable, about Durham. And if you're counting on Barr bending the law, don't. Barr is a lawyer's lawyer. He's been an attorney general before. He's been a great attorney general thus far. Don't believe the slanders from the left, but also don't get caught up in the hype from the right. Just wait and see what comes out. People who try and get one day ahead of this news cycle end up run over by it. Let me go back to Kentucky if I can. President Trump talking about the left last night, cut number 21.
They want to indoctrinate your children, you know this. Destroy anyone who holds traditional American values. All you have to do is ask the boys from Covington Catholic High School. Some of whom are here tonight.
Stop. Do you realize what Valentine that is to the people who hate the media? Because the Covington Catholic kids got rolled, right? They got rolled. Trump thanks himself, by the way. I love this. Cut number 23 of the president.
So President Obama left Mitch and me and Rand and all of us. He left 142 openings for judges. You're not supposed to allow any. You don't do that. You know, they say the most important thing a president can do is federal judges, right? Including the Supreme Court, obviously. And I came in and I said, how many do we have? And they said, how many what, sir? I said, judge openings. And I thought they'd say none, or one or two. He said, sir, we have 142. I said, what? I said, tell me again. He said, we have 142. So Mitch and I and Rand would like to thank very much President Obama.
Oh, trolling President Obama, trolling Harry Reid, trolling the world. Oh, the Trump derangement syndrome inside the Beltway this morning is high. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
It's a beautiful day, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thanks for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Listen, I got a great show coming up today. Michael Oren's joining me in the last half hour from Israel about the explosive piece he wrote in The Atlantic yesterday, Israel on the verge of war with Iran. David Drucker coming up after the break, in the next break. Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, along today. Jake Sherman from Politico. But let's go listen to some Donald Trump. Full-strength Donald Trump on display last night. I got to go back to the clip from the Kentucky rally I was playing as we went into the break. This rally has just got to chill the spines of every Trump derangement syndrome person out there, because they talk to each other, right? The writers from the New York Times talk to the writers at MSNBC, and they all agree that the country hates Trump, and they don't realize that there are places where Trump is revered, and there are places in between. But he went to Kentucky, where I think he put Matt Bevin over the top. We'll see if Bevin loses, by the way. That's a big warning sign for Donald Trump. And if Bevin wins, it's by the same amount that he won 4 years ago. That is a sign that the politics of America are stuck in deadlock. And if Bevin increases his margin of victory, watch out, America. Trump is coming back, and there's going to be real change. Again, here's Donald Trump on the judges, which just makes me laugh. Cut number 23.
So President Obama left Mitch and me and Rand and all of us. He left 142 openings for judges. You're not supposed to allow any. You don't do that. You know, they say the most important thing a president can do is federal judges, right? Including the Supreme Court, obviously. And I came in and I said, how many do we have? And they said, how many what, sir? I said, judge openings. And I thought they'd say none, or one or two. He said, sir, we have 142. I said, what? I said, tell me again. Said we have 142. So Mitch and I and Rand would like to thank very much President Obama, because nobody has ever been so generous.
It says trolling President Obama. I have a meeting today downtown in the heart of Team Obama land as the presidents of the various presidential foundations gather. And I love talking to my Democratic Presidential Foundation counterparts. And I love talking to the Presidential Foundation counterparts who are Republican. It's actually a world of history is different from the world of politics, and we all get along just fine. But I hope they didn't hear this rally last night, because then they're going to have their TDS faces on. I don't need that. But Trump occasionally goes completely to the heart of a problem with a laser-like focus. Cut number 26.
And they know they're not going to win in 2020, so let's see, what can we do to win? But that's not working too well, you'll see. The American people are fed up with Democrat lies, hoaxes, slander. The Democrats' outrageous conduct has created an angry majority that will vote the do-nothing Democrats the hell out of office soon.
Hoaxes have created an angry majority that will vote the do-nothing Democrats out of office soon. He is on message. Meanwhile, about this sham show trial that Adam Schiff is leading, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was on Fox Business with Lou Dobbs and was asked about the impeachment process. Cut number 27 from a former man of the House who's now America's top diplomat and the senior member of the Trump cabinet.
You know, I, from the beginning, have been unhappy because the officers at the State Department have had to go testify without counsel from the State Department there, without the ability to prepare. The risk that there would be classified information that would leak out or be spilled in a way that the State Department couldn't oversee. We couldn't have counsel in the office, in the room. I regret that. I wish that these were open and fair and a process that reflected what the American people deserve.
You know, Mike Pompeo is being assailed by the left right now, right? They're trying to turn the former ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch, into some kind of martyr. The president simply recalled her. That's it. And every ambassador serves at the pleasure of the president. This is like basic 101 State Department manual. You work for the president. You're in the executive branch. It's a unitary executive. And so there is like zero interest in or outrage over Maria Yovanovitch. And Mike Pompeo is hitting pay dirt here. And the country's elite media doesn't know it. It's like they live in a sound booth. Stay tuned, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network Foundation.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, 33 minutes after the hour this wonderful Tuesday morning. Democrats are increasingly dancing with Pete Buttigieg. Yes, he is the mayor of South Bend. Believe it or not, the mayor of South Bend is surging. New York Times this morning, Holly Bailey, Amy Wang story. Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign scheduled a rally here on a recent Saturday night, setting up a choice for local Democrats. See the mayor of South Bend or watch a nationally televised Iowa Hawkeyes football game. More than 700 people turned out and stood for hours in occasional drizzle and frigid temperatures to hear Buttigieg speak from a small stage on the Roosevelt High School's front lawn. A big football game in lousy weather and you get 700 people? Things like that just don't happen, said Matt Paul, a local Democratic strategist who ran Hillary Clinton's 2016 Iowa campaign. Something is clearly going on. Let me explain this for you. Pete Buttigieg does not appear to be crazy, corrupt, or infirm. Seriously, there are Democrats out there who are just saying, don't be crazy, don't be corrupt, don't be infirm. Who do I have left? Don't be crazy, don't be corrupt, don't be infirm. I thought at the end of the day it would be Kamala Harris. I didn't see, the married gay man from South Bend shooting like a rocket up the polls, but he's an impressive intellect. He has charisma of intelligence. And he's one of the few Democrats to appear on this show, for example, not afraid to go places. He should come back. Liz Smith, if you're listening, he should come back. Let's cut this audio and send it to Liz Smith. But in the meantime, Joe Biden, look, I don't know John Solomon's reporting from Adam. I don't know his sources. He seems to get some scoops other people don't. I think he's wired in to some people in the government who give him stuff. Not me. That's not how I do it. I got to know my source. But John Solomon has sources I don't have. And John Solomon's writing some stuff about Hunter Biden that just make your eyes get big. Meanwhile, Joe Biden talks with Gerald Sieb, very respected Beltway guy, yesterday about foreign affairs, and it just doesn't sound good. Here's Joe Biden talking about the biggest mistake in foreign policy, at least since 2003. I'm not sure it's a mistake to have gone into Iraq. It was a bad mistake not to have enough troops and not to, it was a terrible mistake to dissolve the Iraqi army. I don't want to blame Ambassador Bremer for everything that went wrong. I understand he's coping with the loss of his wife and all that kind of, people make mistakes. We screwed up the occupation badly. No way, no two ways around it. But Then after the surge, which George W. Bush ordered and which the American troops, along with Iraqi patriots, won at great cost, the country was secure, prospering, stable, and we cut and ran. And Iraq collapsed into chaos. Remember the JVs that President Obama talked about? The JVs that became ISIS, that took over a third of the country and Syria, and just the merciless people. Joe Biden talked about the decision to leave Iraq in 2011 with Gerald Sieb. Here's what he said, cut number 5.
Well, it was a mistake in the sense that the president asked me to draw down the 150,000 combat troops, and I was in charge of that. And I pled with the Iraqi government to allow a residual force to stay so we could stay and focused on then al-Qaeda before ISIS. But President Bush had made a deal with the Iraqis that all the forces would be out. We could not get the votes in the parliament to change it so that we would be able to, with permission, stay in the region. Once al-Qaeda became ISIS and broke through from Syria into Iraq, it all changed, and we went back in and we're helping.
You know, absolutely a lie. There's just no way around that. There is no new agreement. There was never the need for an agreement. That was an excuse from Team Obama to cut and run. And Joe Biden knows it, and reporters who don't know it are complicit in the lie. We've got thousands of American troops in Iraq right now. I know a lot of them. And they're there, and there is nothing different between the legal situation now as there was then. There was no reason to pull out. It was a political move that resulted in a reign of terror by the most evil people on the planet. And Joe Biden just owned it. So we had to go. I was in charge of that. The president put me in charge of that. Honest to goodness, Democrats are shaking their head and saying, oh my gosh, he's owning 2011. What's wrong with this guy? Then he tries to explain the flip-flop on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, cut number 6.
Well, look, that is no longer on the table. I'm not going to sign or participate in any trade agreement that doesn't have environmentalist and labor at the table. I literally mean it, at the table. But I do agree that the idea that we're going to be able to deal with China's rogue behavior is not realistic. Either we're going to set the rules of the road or China's going to set the rules of the road. So I think it's very important we focus on the real problems China's causing. It's not agricultural imbalance and a trade deficit. It's they're stealing property. They're engaged in intellectual theft. They are moving in a direction to the violation of a whole range of activities that are not appropriate.
He didn't mention the Assassin's Mace. He didn't mention Michael Pillsbury 100-year marathon. He did not mention the growing naval presence of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy plan, which is quite the significant force. Not quite near peer. I mean, not quite peer. It's near peer, and it's definitely a peer in the South China Sea. But it's a big deal. Finally, the Iran deal. I just told you in the first segment, millions of people are marching in Iraq against Iran. Coming up in the last hour, Michael Oren will join me from Israel to explain the precipice on which Israel finds itself opposite of Iran. Iranian behavior has grown more malign with every day. The JCPOA did nothing to change that regime, which could easily change itself into a normal nation state very easily. Mike Pompeo's laid it out repeatedly, as has Donald Trump. The JCPOA made it worse. Didn't make it better. It enriched it and made it worse. It was on the brink of caving completely when instead we caved. We were holding a full house. We might have been holding a straight flush. I'm not going to say royal flush. No one ever gets a royal flush in foreign affairs. But we might have been holding a straight flush. This is confusing the Steelers fans who play. Steeler fans like that game that kids play. What do we call it, Dwayne? Where you put one card down and the other card wins. What do you call that game? The one you play all day in there. War. That's Dwayne's favorite game. And the Steelers fans play war, and I'm talking poker. So we didn't have a royal flush. We had a straight flush. And then John Kerry folded. And the Iranians had a pair of twos. And so here's Joe Biden on what he would do as soon as he became president, which isn't going to happen, so it doesn't really matter. It's just a means of underscoring the collapse he's undergoing. Cut number 7. I
would reinstate the Iran nuclear deal, conditioned on Iran, us being able to verify, which was the most intensive inspection regime in all of human history. It makes no sense at all to have walked away from that. But I would not yield on the commitments that had to be made by the Iranians and or the significant ability to prevent the Iranians from being able to benefit from their oil and or trade absent them keeping the commitment on nuclear power.
Now, again, it's just another lie. That most intrusive inspections regime in history, actually, when we invaded Iraq, that was the most intensive inspection regime in history, and we discovered they didn't have WMD. But we're not allowed on military bases under the Iranian agreement. They wouldn't let us on. Israel had to go and steal all the details on the Iranian nuclear program. It's just a remarkably crazy assertion. And it's why Pete Buttigieg is rising in the polls and rising in the polls and rising in the polls, because he is demonstrably not crazy, corrupt, incompetent, doddering, or burdened by 40 years of mistakes. He's not trying to take away your private insurance. He's a left-winger, and he's radical, but he's a very comfortable radical. A lot like President Obama, generational change, very dangerous candidate, but he doesn't really have to worry about Elizabeth Warren. She's going to fall apart after Iowa. He's got to worry about lack of appeal among African-American voters. He's got to worry about the fact, not that he's gay and married. I actually don't think that changes one vote in America that would have gone a different way, but I don't think it changes a vote. I think he's got to worry about people saying, Mayor, South Bend. The Democratic National Committee didn't know. I think he's got to get out of the boombox that is the left-wing corner of the Democratic primary and talk to people. He wants to pack the Supreme Court. He wants to abolish the Electoral College. Just don't be crazy, Pete. You know better than that. You really do know better than that. Rhodes Scholar, veteran, served abroad in Afghanistan. Talk about your strength. Don't talk about the crazy stuff. I mean, Joy Behar on The View yesterday, talking about what Beto O'Rourke's problem was. Cut number 9.
Should not tell everything they're going to do. Like, if you're going to take people's guns away, wait till you get elected, then take the guns away. Don't tell them ahead of time. By the way.
All right, there you go. That's the Democrats. They're going to figure it out. And they're telling people that they're going to pack the court. That's just not going to work well. It's just not going to work well at all. Kamala Harris is collapsed. Now, I was wrong about this. I thought she was a great candidate, and I just failed to factor in the California factor, which is just because you're great in California doesn't mean anything. We don't export like we used to Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Earl Warren. We don't export great candidates anymore. We exported Kamala Harris, and she's collapsed. Talking with CBS's Ed O'Keefe yesterday, cut number 3.
I'm all in Iowa. I'm all in.
Your team vowed in the last month that you would finish in the top 3 in this state. Is that still the goal?
We are going to end up in Iowa doing very well.
But does it have to be a top 3 finish?
I think it has to be exactly what we want it to be.
That would be a victory then, right?
Well, we're going to do well in Iowa, and I'm sure of that.
Why not just say yes? Because if you don't get one of the 3 tickets out of Iowa, you're done. Now, what I was leading up to telling everyone is this. Pete Buttigieg is not competing against Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. He's competing against Michael Bloomberg. The former mayor of New York is sitting there amid his billions and billions and billions of dollars thinking, I can win this thing. I'm not crazy. I'm not addled. I think I'm still competent. I don't have 40 years of foreign policy fiasco. I do have my gun problem, and Joy Behar just screwed it for me on that, but I could win this thing. That's the problem for Pete Buttigieg. That's it. Now, I got to tell you, the president was on the front lawn of the White House yesterday, cut number 17, talking about Ambassador Yovanovitch.
I don't know her, but if you look at the transcripts, the president of Ukraine was not a fan of hers either. I mean, he did not exactly say glowing things. I'm sure she's a very fine woman. I just don't know much about her.
Okay, so this is going to be Steny Hoyer, Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, longtime member of the Democratic majority team, cut number 4, talking about whether or not impeachment is fair.
But no, we have not, time is not constraining us. The truth and the facts are constraining us. We are going to move as soon as the facts and the truth dictate that we have, which means that when Adam Schiff is determined that he is through what he needs to have in terms of testimony and evidence, he will then, pursuant to the resolution, submit it to the Judiciary Committee, and the Judiciary Committee will proceed in a manner giving the rights to the President and to the Republicans that exceed, frankly, the rights that were available to the minority in the Clinton.
Sorry, Stenny, it's called
minority.
Fruits of the Poison Tree. You can't repair this process. Secret testimony, Star Chamber, ex parte contact with the whistleblower. It's a nightmare. Look here, Relief Factor. It's not a nightmare. It's what you need. Time of the day that I take my package of Relief Factor. They're the 4 pills. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I don't guess. I just let ReliefFactor.com do that work for me. I got a little bit of lukewarm coffee here. And every morning at this time, I get myself my Relief Factor, and then I remind all of you people out there, the starter pack is $19.95. Give it a try. Many of you have been saying, Hugh, have you been losing weight? Yeah, I've been out there running and walking more than I normally do. Inspired by Bob Costa and Chuck Todd, of all people. These guys lost like 30 pounds each. How? Walking and running. And so, ReliefFactor.com gets you back in the game. Go out and get some. Go out and get some. Right now, during the break, I'll be right back. David Drucker joins me next.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
And we're supporting our police. We're rebuilding our military. We're defeating radical Islamic terrorists like never before. The monstrous animal known as al-Baghdadi is dead. And the man that took his place is dead also.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That was the rally last night in Kentucky. It's Election Day today. Louisville, Lexington, all my listeners in Kentucky, get out and vote for Matt Bevin. I'm joined by David M. Drucker of the Washington Examiner. David, if the Trump derangement syndrome suffering left saw that rally last night, they're just passed out on their floors. They haven't woken up yet.
Well, it's Kentucky. They like Trump in Kentucky.
It's bigger than that, David. It's just about wherever it was red, it's redder. Wherever it was blue, it was bluer. But the blue people don't seem to know that the red people exist.
Well, that's true, but I would say there are a lot of red people that don't understand the blue people exist either. So I think this is an equal opportunity disease.
It might be, although yesterday's reaction to Suzuki's wearing the MAGA hat. By the way, I think it is the funniest moment of the Trump presidency, which is saying a lot. When the president hugs Suzuki. It is do you agree with me? The funniest moment of the Trump presidency.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think it matters, and I thought it was amusing. I also thought, by the way, the Nationals have done a good job of navigating the politics of all of this. Some of their players did not attend, clearly because they don't like Trump. One of them was outspoken about it, although respectfully so. And some of them did go. Most of them went, and one of them wore a hat. So you have the Nationals kind of straddling that line, probably better than other teams have done, which I thought was pretty remarkable in and of itself.
Although they're big stars, Zimmerman and Suzuki. Zimmerman gave the president a jersey. Stephen Strasburg is tweeting out this morning when people tried to make him into a Trump hater. He said, that's fake news. He is fake news. And then Suzuki, what was so funny about that, and it goes to the heart of the president's strength as a campaigner. He's an entertainer, promoter, reality TV star. He's out there tweeting away with Sean Spicer to win Dancing with the Stars. He's working the cultural ropes every single day, David Drucker. Pete Buttigieg is clueless.
Well, I don't know if they're completely clueless, but I would say this. With the president, he's different than others, and it can be a high wire act because it's high risk, high reward. And so there are things he does that causes him far more trouble than he needs and that is necessary. There are things he does that work quite well for him.
Let me explain what I mean by clueless, because Liz Smith listens and she'll hate me. I think Pete Buttigieg is the smartest guy in this field, both Democrat and Republican. I think Mike Pompeo is about the only guy that can go one-on-one with him in a Jeopardy contest. But he hates the president so much, he says crazy things about the president and doesn't realize when he does that, instead of saying, look, the president's been a unique political force at a unique time whose time has passed, he goes into TDS. And that's a big mistake because those folks in Kentucky, David, they don't want to hear that from anyone. They might be open to Democrats in the off years, but they do not want to hear that.
Right. I totally understand, but that's what Democratic primary voters want to hear. And so, we have seen primary candidates from both parties do this sort of thing time and time again, and then, be in a pickle in a general election. And, I think the bigger thing for Democrats is whether or not they understand that there are reasons why Trump won that are not entirely of the most awful reasons they can imagine. And unless they grapple with that and deal with it, they're going to put themselves at a disadvantage in the electoral battlegrounds that matter.
Exactly. And let's go to the Michigan New York Times Siena poll quickly, where Trump beats Elizabeth Warren by 6 points among all voters, 4 points among likely voters. That's because Elizabeth Warren wants to take away union and union retirees' platinum health care plans. I mean, that's the most obvious thing in the world. That's what that number means.
Right, exactly. And look, I've been writing about this for months. Democrats, they worked for like nearly a decade to get to a point where Obamacare was popular. And it was worked to them to great effect in the midterm elections in 2018. And now they want to run on taking away health care plans and upending the entire thing again, on top of the whole, how is it going to be paid for because of the taxes issue. And that's why Nancy Pelosi is telling them to cut it out. And it's one of the things that Biden does understand, whatever people think he does and doesn't understand. He understands this. Buttigieg understands it as well. But
yes, he does. Yes, he does.
The field that we hear from they do not seem to get it. And it's going to cause them a problem, and they're going to squander opportunities if they insist on this. Unless,
quick question, David Drucker, you're reporting.
Yeah.
Quick question on your
They're
reporting.
banking go ahead. Yeah.
Is Michael Bloomberg getting close to getting in? Because he could be a disruptor. He could get the nomination. Is he getting close?
Well, I don't know. This is not something that I've followed, but I think that the hour is late, and I don't think a candidate like him has enough support in the Democratic primary to get in at this late hour and get it done.
Even when they know Elizabeth Warren is giving the race away?
Yes, because look at all the support she has gained in the midst of embracing all of this.
Okay, David Drucker knows what he's talking about, friends. Follow him on Twitter, David M. Drucker. Follow me to hour number 2. Michael Oren coming up in hour number 3. Go nowhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hughiverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hughiverse.com.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 8 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to everyone who's listening everywhere in the world. Don't miss next hour. Michael Oren's going to join me from Israel at the bottom of the next hour. I've got Rich Lowry coming up this hour. I got to go back to the rally last night because first I got to go to the Nationals, go to the White House yesterday. World champion Nationals, city's in love with them, Beltway's in love with them. I can't walk down any street in Virginia or in the District of Maryland without people wearing their Nats caps, etc. All great. I'm good. I'm happy for them. I'm not a Nats guy. I'm an Indians guy. And I'm an American League guy. And I would have only voted for the Nationals if they were playing the Yankees. But felt bad for the Astros. Nevertheless, everybody's in love with them. That's great. Until they go to the White House. And Ryan Zimmerman says this to the president. Cut number 14.
Mr. President, me and my teammates, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having us here. This is an incredible honor that I think all of us will never forget, and we'd also like to thank you for keeping everyone here safe in our country. And continuing to make America the greatest country to live in the world.
Oh, my gosh, rant patriotism coming from a Nats fan. That was bad, but that wasn't as bad as when Suzuki, the catcher, came up, put on a MAGA hat, and the president hugged him. I can't play you the audio. There isn't any audio. It's just a video. You've got to go watch the video. I've tweeted it out. It is the funniest moment of the Trump presidency. And the president, who is a big man, physically a large man, is not intimidated by athletes. He doesn't have jockophobia like some people like Dwayne do. And he's not intimidated by athletes at all. And so he goes up and he gives Suzuki a bear hug, and it is so funny. And then on Twitter, the Nats fans melt down. I got a little advice for him. The Trump-hating Nats fans. I have been an Indians, Browns, and Cavs fan for as long as I can remember sport. LeBron James was the biggest President Obama supporter in the world. I never cared. I don't give a lick about the politics of sports athletes that I follow. I bet that Baker Mayfield is a big Trump fan. He's never said that. I bet you John Dorsey, the GM, is not a big Trump fan. He's never said that. I have some guesses. I think Joe Thomas is probably a big Trump fan. Don't know about Hawk. Don't know. There are a lot of people I don't know about, but it doesn't matter to me. If they play ball well for the clubs that I root for, because I like to watch sports, I like the people. And if they're not jerks. Brown sadly had to fire a young man yesterday who went on Twitter and made violent, racist comments after their very disappointing loss to the Broncos. And I hope that man gets a second chance somewhere in the league and he learns this is a new world. Athletes just don't seem to get Twitter. They really don't. They just don't seem to get Twitter. But let me just tell the fans, it doesn't matter. Ryan Zimmerman is your guy. Okay, Suzuki is your guy. He likes Trump. Doesn't matter. He's your guy. And nothing matters. Barbra Streisand. Can we get some Barbra Streisand music, please? Let me play for you Barbra Streisand. Anything good by Barbra Streisand. Anything from Funny Girl. All right, just anything. That was a little bit of Barbra Streisand. Actually, can I get a full bit of Barbra Streisand? We have a Barbra Streisand shortage. I want to make a point about something. Barbra Streisand for 50 years in America. I haven't heard her sing in 10, so I can't say that's true anymore. But for 50 years in America, between the ages of 5 and 55, Barbra Streisand is like the best female vocalist in America. Like Sinatra was the best male vocalist in America for pretty much the same period of time. Barbra Streisand in Funny... Very good choice. 1973, right? All right. She's nuts, right? Barbra Streisand is nuts. She's off the left-wing fringe. I'll bet you we got 1,000 photos of her with Harvey Weinstein, by the way. I don't care. She is a beautiful singer. Other people can't hit those notes. I don't care that she's a left-wing, off the left edge of the world, lefty Hollywood hypocrite when it comes to Harvey Weinstein. I don't care. I'll listen to this song again and again and again. Because I was in high school when it came out. You know, it was every girl you were trying to get to go out on a date with you was listening to this and watching this movie. So, yeah, I'll always like her voice. And I just want to say okay, enough of Barbara. Barbara Streisand and Ryan Zimmerman appearing in the same sentence was not on your radar this morning, right? Well, I will tell you, it's going to be on your radar for a long time, unless they get over this. Now, I want to turn to what Donald Trump said last night. The most important thing he said last night was about our most important adversary in the world, China. Doesn't mean our enemy, but our adversary, our competitor, China. Donald Trump, cut number 24 in Kentucky last night.
On trade, we're starting to set records every week. We're reversing decades of Washington disloyalty, stupidity, and corruption. Past administrations did nothing as China looted our factories and stole up to $500 billion of American dollars. By the way, people can't even believe it. Not 500 million, that's a lot. If you lost 500 million, that's a lot. I thought that was another typo. $500 billion they would take a year from us. We rebuilt China. And I give them a lot of credit, by the way. I give China. What I don't give credit to is Obama and past administrations beyond Obama. I don't give them credit because they let it happen. They should have never let it happen, but now we're taking in tens of billions and billions and billions of dollars. Just recently, very slow, Sleepy Joe, Biden that is, said of China's piracy and plunder, they're not that bad, folks. He always used the word folks. I watched him today. He used the word folks. Hi, folks. Hi, my time is up. I got to leave. Now they have him all freaked out because he makes a mistake every time he speaks. So I can just see these handlers, because they're handlers. Like they use on horses, they're handlers, right? All right, get him off now. He's been up there long enough. So they're screaming, get off, get off. Sleepy Joe, get off the stage. Please, please, Joe, you're doing fine. Joe, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. And then he goes, I love being in Ohio. But he was in Iowa yesterday, you saw. And they say, damn it, he should have left sooner. We told him, get off the stage, Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe, get off the damn stage. But he said about Sleepy Joe, about China, they're not that bad, folks. They're not really competition for us. No, they're not. $500 billion a year, right? He did nothing in 8 years, him and Obama. In fact, I'm here because of them when you think about it, right? I'm here because of them. Kellyanne Conway, stand up, Kellyanne. Another warrior. I just saw Kellyanne. I said, stand up. No, but think of it, somebody saying that. Now look, the $1.5 billion that Hunter, who got thrown out of the Navy, who had no experience, who had no anything, got a lot of money from Ukraine, but he got $1.5 billion from China. I got to tell you, I've been negotiating with China. They're very tough. That is not the same group of Chinese people that I've been negotiating with. They gave him $1.5 billion. He'll make millions and millions with that. And how about saying, by the way, Mr. President, would you please take over the negotiations that President Trump is no longer handling? Guess what? You would be sold down the tube so fast. And we're so close. China wants to make a deal so badly. I think they'd love to see another president. I think, they would like to see another president more than crooked Hillary would, okay? Can you imagine if they ever took over negotiations of this deal, which is going to be one of the greatest deals ever made? Has to be. Because we started down here and they were up there. Has to be. Can you imagine if they ever took over negotiations? This is what China would love more than anything else. It's not going to happen, folks, because we can't let our country go back to hell. We can't do it. We can't let it happen.
Look, I have my problems with the president. I have my admiration for the president. I am simply an objective observer of campaign ability. That if I had a producer, I would do a B-roll of China, 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 China. And then when he says one or two judges, yeah, his New York accent, it's got a certain communicability that is unique to presidential politics. I mean, it is unique. I've been following this since 1976 when I campaigned for Jerry Ford in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. This is a unique appeal that Democrats underestimate at their political peril, and they have been doing so every day since he got elected. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem
Hugh.
Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I'm talking about with David Drucker last hour. Democrats are out there running on destroying your health care. Obamacare is not a great solution. It would be better if it was gone and we replaced it with market-driven mechanisms. But it's not terrible. All right, it's not terrible. And so what would be terrible is Medicare for all. It would destroy Medicare for some that currently exists for seniors, into which they have paid forever. And it would destroy union retirees insurance and union insurance and teachers insurance and private health insurance. And that's what the Democrats want to run on. Now, a sponsor of this program, the Job Creator Network, is doing something about this because they started healthcareforyou.com. And healthcareforyou.com is where you can go and tell your stories about how Obamacare is failing. You know, how have your premiums gone up? Is your family covered? Did people drop off? Did the exchange not work? Whatever it is that happened to you, go to healthcareforyou.com. 4 words, healthcareforyou.com, and share your story so that Job Creator Network can share that with electeds and tell them why what we need to be doing is walking back from Obamacare towards the market, not rushing towards single-payer Medicare for all. You get involved in that at healthcareforyou.com. Please go and get it done. Get it done today. Healthcareforyou.com. Let's go check on the market. The president last night saying we're very close to a deal with China. But we've said that before, and then it goes away, and China gets upset, and then we don't get a deal. But the market listens very closely, so I'm clicking on my pre-market report data brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian are together. Lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you the money. AndrewandTodd.com is where you go answer a couple questions. They'll tell you how much you can qualify for if you want to buy a home. They'll tell you how much cash you can get out of your house if you want to refinance and you want to consolidate debt. They'll tell you how to cut years off your mortgage, get a lower rate. Whatever is best for you, they will tell you. Well, you can call them at 888-888-1172, which thousands of you have done. They're swamped, and that's great because they only hire the best people. Where have you heard that? The best people. I've been to their offices. I know their team. But you'll often talk to Andrew and Todd directly. 888-888-1172. And they send me all their feedback. So I know how well they take care of you. 888-888-1172. Don't get left behind. The 10-year at this moment is 1.79%. It's up a little bit. And you don't want to get left behind. Goldman Sachs says U.S.-China tariffs may have peaked. The market is happy. Yesterday, Dow was up 114, NASDAQ up 46, S&P went up 11. And at this hour, Japan closed overnight up 1.76%. That's how happy Japan is. China's up 0.5% in the Hong Kong index, even though they've got Carrie Lam stuck to them like Joe Biden is stuck to the Democrats. Everything is green this morning. The S&P's up 6 points. The NASDAQ up another 23 points. The Dow's up 70 points as we await word of what's going to happen on the China deal. And that is all very good. In the meantime, don't get left behind. AndrewandTodd.com. Let me go back to the judge thing. I'm going to talk with Rich Lowry after the break. But this is one of those comments from the president last night. It's voting. It's election day in Kentucky. Hey, you folks in Louisville and Lexington, get out there and vote for Matt Bevin. I'm a Virginia voter. Do you actually know I have no Republicans running in my district? Not one running for the Assembly or the state Senate. I'm going to go in and write in a Republican just to show that we're alive. I left Orange County, which was competitive, and came to the suburbs of Virginia, the Beltway. And I'm trapped in deeper blue than I left, but the state at least is light blue. It's a light blue state, but the governor's race is not until the year after Trump's reelection, until I get to cast on it, because I lived like in deep blue freezer land. But I'll go write somebody in. Get out and vote. We live in a great country. Get out and vote. Here's the president talking about his judges, cut number 23.
So President Obama left Mitch and me and Rand and all of us. He left 142 openings for judges. You're not supposed to allow any. You don't do that. You know, they say the most important thing a president can do is federal judges, right? Including the Supreme Court, obviously. And I came in and I said, how many do we have? And they said, how many what, sir? I said, judge openings. And I thought they'd say none, or one or two. He said, sir, we have 142. I said, what? I said, tell me again. He said, we have 142. So Mitch and I and Rand would like to thank very much President Obama, because nobody has ever been so generous.
I just love that he's thanking and trolling President Obama. Stay tuned, America. Rich Lowry is next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network Foundation.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network. Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio inside the Beltway. I am joined by Rich Lowry. He is the editor of National Review. You know Rich from Fox News. You know Rich from the National Review. But you also know him as a great author. One of the best books on Lincoln I read in the last 10 years came from Rich Lowry. Taught me a lot about the Lincoln Internal Improvements Plan. Now, Rich is back with a new book, The Case for Nationalism, which is receiving great applause in some sectors, boos and hisses in others. It's like a Trump appearance at the United Fighting Revolution. Rich, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good, Hugh. How are you?
Good. I got to admit, I was in Spain for 10 days, and the book did not get to me before I left. So unlike almost every interview I'm doing, I have not read The Case for Nationalism. So I did the best thing other than that, which is to read Carlos Lozada in the Washington Post and Gabriel Schoenfeld in the American Interest, and came to the conclusion that everybody is seeing everything through the prism of Donald Trump, which I think is one of the reasons why you wrote The Case for Nationalism, right?
Yeah, exactly. So nationalism is soon to be a dirty word. It's soon to be even a dirtier word because Donald Trump uses it about himself. And I wanted to delve into the phenomenon of nationalism rather than Trump per se. And nationalism is a very old force, very powerful force, very natural force. There have been all sorts of efforts to eradicate it across history from various empires and totalitarian ideologies. It always fails, and it's part of the mainstream of the American tradition. It runs through Hamilton, it runs through our friend Lincoln, it runs through TR.
That's what I thought when I was reading these reviews, that they had obviously not read your work on Lincoln, where you talked a lot about Whig internal improvements and the effort to build a great nation. That is part of the tradition, I assume, that you build on in The Case for Nationalism.
Yeah, so it basically begins with Hamilton and the idea that we're going to have a strong and capable national government, and we're going to be eventually a great power like Britain. And there are a couple key nationalist projects throughout our history. The first and most important is the Revolution, which is our nation rising up against a pretty good government in the scheme of things. It's hard to get better than the British and the British Empire as far as empires go. But we say no, we're going to be a self-governing people. And then there's that big choice at the beginning: are we going to dissolve into these squabbling statelets, or are we going to have a strong and capable, but controlled and limited national government, which is how you get the the Constitution, and then we expand across the continent all the way to the West Coast, which is very important because we're not just an idea. The extent of our territory and the power of our nation matters a great deal. And then in the 20th century, you see Wilson, FDR, these kind of nationalists, democratic nationalists who believe that our foreign policy should be based on a true understanding of nationalism, which should support sovereign and self-governing countries around the world.
And you skipped over, Rich, I want to go back because you skipped over the original after the Constitution is ratified. And cue up my favorite song from Hamilton, Adam, if you can remember what it is. The two great original quid pro quos, right? The first quid pro quo is the room where it happened, where Hamilton sits down with Jefferson and Madison. Hamilton gets his national bank to finance our new national project, and Jefferson and Madison get a new national capital close by their home so they don't have to ride so far, and giving the South a prize, followed by Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase, which is executed in an extra constitutional, I won't call it unconstitutional, those are both nationalist projects, and they traded one for the other.
Yeah, and so Jefferson has constitutional qualms, as you know, about the Louisiana Purchase, but he's like, what are you kidding me? We're going to double the extent of the country or whatever it is. Of course we're going to do that. And the continental expansion, which is a reason now, AOC and members of the Squad and the left say that the nation is illegitimate because it supposedly stole its territory, was a matter of consensus until slavery got in the way and the question of whether new territory would be slave or free. And I skipped over that, of course. A huge nationalizing event is the Civil War. And this is why when people say in the American context the nationalists, are the racists or the bigots, give me a break. The nationalists were the ones who broke down the system of slavery and then broke down the system of Jim Crow, as people who were advancing a spurious Southern nationalism and a spurious, exaggerated sense of states' rights, who were denying blacks their rights and creating a hideous system of repression.
Now, again, I have not yet read The Case for Nationalism, but I have a very specific reason why I'm very glad it's coming out right now. We confront nationalism in our greatest competitor, our adversary, and possibly our enemy in the future, the People's Republic of China. I've just finished rereading Kissinger's On China, the great Thucydides Trap book, Destined for War by Graham Allison and Michael Pillsbury, 100-Year Marathon. It is clear that the People's Republic of China party is using nationalism to unify that which is divided, and they have their eyes set on Hong Kong and eventually Taiwan, and they are using nationalism to do it. Nationalism exists. It is simply a current that drives history, and people who ignore it or minimize it are doing so at their own and their nation's peril.
Yeah, so it can be used and abused, and I think the Russians in particular and the Chinese abuse it, and they're basically neo-imperial states flying under the banner of nationalism. But just in the domestic political context, it's just, for me, it's so foolish. The Democrats turned their back on the nationalist tradition within their party, which runs through FDR and Truman and JFK, and went totally to cosmopolitan progressivism. And Republicans kind of lost touch with it too. And that's why this amazing tool was kind of left on the floor. And Donald Trump, however, instinctively, who knows, picked up on it. And I think the Republican Party should learn from that, and in any post-Trump environment, whenever that comes, should thoughtfully integrate nationalism into their program. And Democrats are idiotic to turn their back on it.
Before I come back to that, I want to explain that I believe what China is doing with their unification project, and despotically so in Uyghur land, is pure nationalism, not the neo-imperialism of Belt and Road. And I think a lot of Putin, his day-to-day political agenda is driven by tapping into deep Russian nationalism, that the same sort of nationalism that defeated Napoleon in 1812, right? It lives, which is love of country. And love of country can be abused, but can also be harnessed. In fact, today, Rich, in Iraq, millions of Iraqis are demonstrating against the hegemon in the region, Iran, even though many of them are Shias, and Iran is a Shia regime, because they do not want their lives run by the Iranians next door.
Right. And you just see instance after instance of this in history. It is hateful to people to be governed by someone else, and especially hateful to be governed by someone, a power that speaks a foreign language. And this is one of the key elements of national cohesion is language. It's one of the key elements that keeps the people together culturally. And I talk about this in the book. Even Canada, nice, pleasant Canada. You throw a French-speaking province in the middle of it, you can have a big problem.
Bonjour, hi. It's now illegal for me to say bonjour, hi with my Quebec listeners.
Yeah, yeah. Or Spain. You see it with Catalonia. So that's just a key element.
By the way, I was just in Spain. I started in Barcelona, and I spent half the time in Catalonia and half the time in the non-Catalonians, like in Mallorca and Ronda and other places, they think the Catalonians are nuts, and the Catalonians are turning out by millions because of nationalism against nationalism. I mean, it's so deeply embedded. So, Rich, what I want to ask you, though, about the Case for Nationalism is I read these reviews, and Carlos Lozada is a very fine book reviewer. Gabriel Schoenfeld, a very smart guy, though he's, never Trump has trapped him in this endless prison of, it's like The Old Prisoner. Are you old enough to have seen The Prisoner on TV, Rich? You're probably not.
Not quite.
No, there was a guy, I think it was James McGigan, trying to get away from the great bubble in the sea, trapped in an endless TV show that was early 60s, mid 60s. And people are trapped in never Trump land, and they can't move on to deal with politics in the way that you're trying to do. And I think reactions to the Case for Nationalism are reflecting that. It's a small group of people, but they are trapped.
Yeah, so, I mean, the attitude I have about this is, among other things, this era should be an opportunity to kind of, kick the tires on some of our assumptions and presuppositions and rethink some things. Doesn't mean that, we throw out all our principles or we change on everything, but we should always be thinking. And I hadn't thought a lot about nationalism prior to the rise of Donald Trump, and especially prior to his first inaugural address, which really got me interested in the topic, and it was ultimately the seed of this book. But for my selfish purposes, the Gabe Schoenfeld review, I found it really notable. The balance of it is about the first 4 pages of the book, where I was like, Trump is a nationalist, and his speeches have been good. His speech in Poland is fantastic. These are important themes. Let's explore the themes. And he's like, in his reviews, damn it, you didn't criticize Trump enough. Yeah, it's not a Trump book.
It's not a Trump book. It's absolutely the craziest thing in the world. But I'm a little bit shocked that you haven't watched The Prisoner now. I was just looking up Patrick McGowan's career, and you should have been able to watch this. You should go look it up right away, because it's absolutely never Trump land. So, Rich, the Case for Nationalism, have you heard anything from the State Department about it? Have you heard anything from Trump land officially as to the fact that you've got something here?
Not yet, except for a couple weeks ago there was a Trump retweet of a book tweet. That's the closest I've gotten so far from anything from Trump world.
Okay, so if I look correctly at the John Bolton, Marco Rubio, Rick Scott-led assault on the Venezuelan dictator Maduro, if I look at the new Amazon series, Jack Ryan Season 2, we have nationalism being tapped into there, which is an appeal to the people of Venezuela to free themselves from a dictator based on Venezuelan nationalism. It's everywhere. I actually think it's ubiquitous and you can't escape it.
Yeah, so, and Venezuela is a good example. Goes back to our revolution. Is the key insight of the American Revolution was that government exists to serve the nation. The nation doesn't exist to serve the government. And the nation has its rights and its claims. And really the first modern instance of this was the English Civil War. We had the English nation and Parliament saying, we represent the nation, we have longstanding rights, and you, the Crown, have violated them, so you're guilty of a crime against the nation. Yep. And the people who are most on Parliament's side in the English Civil War, they come here. One thing I was struck by, John Winthrop in 1634, Massachusetts Bay Colony, considers a revolt against the English crown because the crown is considers coming to take their charter. That's 140 years before the American Revolution. And this is another theme of the book. It's like culture is so important. It's so deep. These grooves, they never go away. And the national identity of this country was crucially influenced by the kind of people who first came here. Now, they created, obviously, a country that was much more wide open, not just for Englishmen, but their notions of liberty and of religion and rights, you can see the stamp on us to this very day.
It's the second lecture of my con law course every year. How did we get here? The Glorious Revolution of 1688 has got to be studied because that was the British Civil War Part 2, and we took our independence war from that. Rich, congratulations. The Case for Nationalism in bookstores everywhere at Amazon.com. Just tweeted out the link. Go and get it, America. Time now for me to tell you about not Rich Lowry's new book, but my old pitch for ReliefFactor.com. There it is. Took it in the first hour. I am glad that I do, and I'm glad that I'm moving around. And today I can't go out and exercise after the show. I got to go downtown. Got to meet with all the foundation execs that run presidential foundations. But I want to remind you, if you've got a commute, I was just checking the commute, 45-minute drive. Oh, my gosh. I hate Washington, D.C. in the morning. But if you've got a long commute in front of you, take relieffactor.com every day. It makes it easier. It doesn't bother you. You got the bad back, the bad knees, the bad ankles, the bad whatever it is. You hate sitting in the car for an hour and a half. You people up in the Bay Area, you've got the 3-hour commute, the hyper commute. You people down in Southern California, you really need relieffactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. Trust me on this. You will join the tens of thousands of people who take it every morning. And if you forgot to take it, turn around, go back, get it, and get right back here. I'm coming back after the break with more of this hour of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
No one else was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it happened. No one else was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it happened. No one really knows how the game is played, the art of the trade, how the sausage gets made. We just assume that it happens, but no one else is in the room where it happens.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Thomas claims
Alexander was on Washington's door.
That's Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison getting together.
Alexander
to make the original quid pro quo post-Constitution, which is a national bank in exchange for D.C. becoming what would eventually become the swamp. It was a swamp. And Jefferson and Madison wanted it to be the national capital, and Hamilton wanted a bank, so they did a quid pro quo. And then followed Louisiana Purchase, which was a quid pro quo with France. Look, I really wanted to do one segment before next hour gets very serious. In the second half with Dr. Michael Oren from Israel, Jake Sherman joins me from Politico at the top of the hour to review Nat's meltdown and a few other things. But just a thought on the life cycle of the meme. There are memes that are accelerating. I left the country for 9 days total. 10 days if you count a half day. 9.5 days out of the country. And a meme came and went when I was gone. And I was trying to disconnect from other than sports. And so I didn't even see it. It's the hashtag OKBoomer. And that hashtag is now, if you use it and you're a teenager, you're clueless. So teenagers have dropped it, but it started with teenagers as a way to shade senior citizens. Quote, a boomer is really more of a type of personality, someone who is intolerant to new ideas and who is ignorant to new ideas, one teen said. So they used it as a retort. Typical surly teenager. I was there once, so were you. Even if you're a teenager, you're there now. And OK Boomer became a big thing. And then it suddenly became not a big thing because everyone used it. And of course, you can't do what everyone else is doing. And I just reflected on the life cycle of memes. There's no way to actually be hip anymore unless you're really, really, really transparent about not being hip. That's the only way, teens. Figure it out. The way not to be hip is actually to read books and know what you're talking about. And then you will be actually hip. You won't make a fool of yourself like Pajama Boy a few years ago, and now teenagers using OK Boomer. By the way, OK Boomer ought to be adopted by trust and estates attorneys everywhere as a trigger of exclusion from testamentary disposition. Now that there isn't a Steelers fan out there that knows what I just said, but the lawyers will know. I think that is actually what ought to happen. I got to go and play again. I'm going to play it next hour too for Jake Sherman. Donald Trump at Kentucky rally. Get out and vote. Louisville, Lexington, everyone in Kentucky listening to me from Matt Bevin. Mississippi, Louisiana, you got governor races today. You Virginians, get out there and vote that are listening to me on AM 570 or down in Norfolk and Virginia Beach and in the middle of the state. Get out and vote. Got no one to vote for in Northern Virginia. Literally, not a Republican on the ballot. That's a sign of a pretty sick party when they can't come up with a sacrificial lamb. But I'll go write somebody in. I'll figure out somebody to write in that lives near me that's a Republican. But here's Donald Trump in Kentucky last night. Just listen to this, cut number 20.
And we're supporting our police. We're rebuilding our military. We're defeating radical Islamic terrorists like never before. The monstrous animal known as al-Baghdadi is dead. And the man that took his place is dead also.
All right, that's enough. What I'm pointing out to you is, boy, is there a Trump land that elite media just doesn't know about or doesn't understand. By the way, the president was surrounded by a very diverse group of youngsters, people that might have been using hashtag OKBoomer before they came to the rally. So don't think that OKBoomer is anti-Trump. It's not. It's just a teenager thing. Anti-Trump has got a lot of appeal to young people. You just don't understand. He's a disruptor. They're disruptors just by who they are. Final word. I cannot believe. Would you get Dwayne on the phone here? Wake him up.
I'm here.
The Prisoner with Patrick McGowan. Did you watch it?
No.
Well, you're too young to watch it. It is absolutely groundbreaking television. I can't believe Rich Lowry didn't know that. It's a 1967 television series. Sci-fi, spy-fi, call it what you want. You don't know anything about it?
When I was born in 66.
Well, there's something called Netflix.
Yeah, and?
If you're going to talk to our demo, you're going to have to at least be...
Our demo. Our demo is what our prisoner
okay,
watchers.
Boomer. Okay, Boomer. Hashtag OK Dwayne.
Do you know what this is?
I'm starting with OK Radio Blogger. That's my new hashtag.
Fine.
OK
I'm
Radio
going out
Blogger.
with what is hip. Something
OK
you don't
Radio
know anything
Blogger.
about.
Hip is my middle name. Stay tuned, America.
You
Hour
speak
number
the
3 of the
lingo.
Hugh Hewitt Show coming up.
What is hip? Tell me if you think you know. What is hip? If you're really hip, the passion is the show. You in a hip trip, maybe hipper than hip. What is hip?
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 8 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
And we're supporting our police. We're rebuilding our military. We're defeating radical Islamic terrorists like never before. The monstrous animal known as al-Baghdadi is dead. And the man that took his place is dead also.
All right. Well, morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to everyone listening in Israel and in China. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, Dr. Michael Oren, as I've promised you on Twitter last night and this morning on the show previous. And that was President Trump in Kentucky last night at a massive rally with massive applause lines. I'm joined by Jake Sherman of Politico Playbook this morning to kick off. And I got to start there, Jake. I came back from a 10-day vacation in Spain. And I found a beltway completely disconnected from what the world's talking about. And I've often found that when I go out and about. I'm going to Tampa this week, going to California next week. I just think the beltway is so turned in on itself. It's completely clueless about places like Kentucky where the president went last night and the crowds that he draws. And I think that New York Times Siena poll yesterday woke some Democrats up. Am I right?
You know, we've talked about this before, Hugh, but the one thing that I found when I went out and talked about my book with Anna Palmer, my co-author of Playbook, is that we went to places and people would say, when are Republicans going to finally turn their back on Trump? And we looked at them and said, you must not understand that there's an entire country that voted for Donald Trump and loves Donald Trump. And he is in my lifetime, he is the single most popular Republican politician that I've ever seen. By far, without a doubt. So I do think there is that disconnect around the country, and maybe that does seep into the Beltway media a little bit.
Because the Beltway media elite hate Donald Trump. Let me play for you what exploded on Twitter yesterday. The Nats, the Nationals, pride of the city, joy of many a baseball fan's heart. I'm an Indians fan, so I'm still in mourning. I'm a Browns fan, which means I'm in perpetual mourning, although we'll come back. Ryan Zimmerman of the Nationals at the White House yesterday, cut number 14.
Mr. President, me and my teammates, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
This is an incredible honor that I think all of us will never forget. And we'd also like to thank you for keeping everyone here safe in our country.
Gosh, the blowback that Zimmerman got and his teammate got for the MAGA hat and all that stuff, Jake, I just laughed through the whole day. And Trump hugged the other guy. I can't remember the other guy's name. Who got the hug?
It was Kurt Suzuki, the starting catcher. I mean, it for many people in the media was an embarrassing moment, to be honest with you, because the blowback was embarrassing to reporters. I mean, first of all, I'm the biggest Nationals fan on planet Earth, probably. At least I consider myself that. I can tell you that I've never really taken an interest in who my team's athletes like or dislike. It has nothing to do. I mean, first of all, I'm almost speechless at it, to be honest with you, because I think
it was so great. It was so great. The hug was so great. And I don't even care about the National League. They don't even play 9 people on a side. They got to free out every 3 innings. So I don't care about the Nats, but I just thought the reaction was so telling, Jake.
I thought so too, and I don't want to name specific people, but people said on Twitter, they've burned a whole reservoir of goodwill. Why? I mean, these guys like President Trump. Again, it goes back to my first point. A lot of people like President Trump, and I was befuddled by that reaction, to be honest with you, because first of all, it's at its core naive. I mean, I just can't understand why people haven't come to grips with the fact that he's the president and people like him. I mean, he might not be everybody's cup of tea, but people like him and people obviously voted for him. And many of those people play for professional sports. And many of those,
well, let me tell you what's going on. They read Michelle Goldberg, who I've been on with Al Sharpton before. I know she's a fine, left-wing columnist, and she's completely unhinged by Trump, as many people in the media are completely. They hate him. He's a criminal. He should be in jail. He should be impeached yesterday, all that kind of stuff. They just don't get it. Now, here is the strategic choice before Mitch McConnell. That it's not in Playbook, but I want you to think on this. There are 3 roads ahead of him. There is peremptory dismissal of any charge from the House, citing the procedural due process flaws in the House. There is an extended deep dive into everything, with the president calling witnesses up to and including Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, anyone he wants, in a full-blown trial of the last 3 years. And then there's the middle road, which is to do the Clinton thing in 99, bring up the charges, the House managers go blah, 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 blah. The Senate votes, there's not 2/3, and it's over. I think the only way that Trump gets hurt is if the Republicans take that last path. If they peremptorily dismiss these charges, or if they go deep into what's been going on against Trump for 3 years, Trump wins, and the Constitution wins with Route 1. Trump wins with Route 3. What do you think Mitch McConnell's going to do? John Cornyn yesterday said number 2, but then he began to lean towards number 1. What do you think, Jake Sherman?
I don't think number 1 is likely, to be honest with you. I don't think, I mean, and McConnell has signaled that number 1 is not likely, and he has said he intends to conduct a trial, which to me would seem that he does not intend to bring up the charges and dismiss them. I do think that politically there have been even Democrats concede that they have not handled this phase of the impeachment process well. But I don't think the Senate can bring them up and dismiss them. I don't think it's tenable for McConnell or Senate Republicans. I think that they will do some combination of 2 and 3, or maybe somewhere in the middle. But I do not think they'll bring up the charges and immediately dismiss them. But that's my gut at this point. I mean, this is a moving target. We don't know when this is going to be done in the House. We don't know when the Senate's going to get the articles, which, by the way, according to the Senate rules, they have to move to trial immediately, any day besides a Sunday. So I think I think it's a little early to know, but I don't think they'll bring up the charges and immediately dismiss them.
Now, I want to recall for you that McConnell need only take a page from a playbook authored by Mitch McConnell to change his mind here. And that playbook he wrote in the aftermath of the Scalia untimely death of Justice Scalia, which is to assert the primacy of the majority in the Senate, and John Cornyn said, you got an argument here, because the problem is that which gets rewarded gets repeated. And Adam Schiff's sham show trial has done great damage to the House's reputation with secret hearings, with ex parte contacts, with the whistleblower, with a whole different laundry list of terrible mistakes Schiff made. And if the Senate doesn't want to be trapped into endless politicized impeachments by majorities becoming more and more intemperate, they've got to draw the line somewhere and say, we're not just going to, if you're going to expect us to hold a trial, you've got to have a pretrial proceeding that has constitutional stature and standing consistent with the 14th Amendment guarantee of due process, which, by the way, applies to impeachments, though people may not know it. That was passed in the aftermath of the original Constitution, so that due process guarantee applies to everything. There was due process in the Fifth Amendment. I think McConnell could be persuaded this is the way to go, Jake. Have you talked to him about it? You talked to everybody up there. Has anyone talked about it?
Well, McConnell's been asked this directly, and he has thrown cold water on the fact that he would just bring up the charges and dismiss them. I mean, maybe not directly, but and you're right. McConnell is subject to change his mind and does so. I want to use the word brazenly, but it's not what I mean, but does so without hesitation. And
that's it. He's bold. He is bold.
And people and Democrats hate him for it, and Republicans love him for it, right? So that's kind of the reality that Mitch McConnell works under. And I just don't know. I think politically a lot of Republicans would probably like to just dismiss them. At this point, it does not seem likely.
All right, so the last thing I got to ask you about is Sean Spicer making it through to another round of Dancing with the Stars. Look, I tweet out to remind people to vote for Sean because everybody thinks he got a raw deal, right? Everybody thinks, both the media and the president, the guy is a good spokesman. He did a good job, but there was a lot of craziness at the beginning of the Trump administration that goes down to being a rookie, and it happened to Bill Clinton. It happened to George W. Bush. It happened to Barack Obama. It happened to Donald Trump, too. And Sean Spicer has got a lot of friends, not just in this town, but across the country. Are you surprised that he's hanging on the strength of America's votes?
Well, no, because President Trump is tweeting that people ought to vote for him, and President Trump has 60 million followers on Twitter. So it seems that that's probably what's behind him winning, because from what I don't watch Dancing with the Stars, so I
neither do I. Never seen a minute of it in my life.
Yeah, I've never seen a minute of it either. But I what I've been told, Sean is not the best dancer, so I'm not sure it's completely on the level. But you know what? good for him, I guess. If he wants to be a professional dancer, then I think he's found his break.
I think he is having fun. I've talked to a friend of his saying he's having more fun than he's had since winning an election night in 2016. And so God bless him and the voters of Dancing with the Stars. I've never seen a minute of it either, Jake. Jake Sherman from Politico, where the playbook every morning ought to arrive, and they help to die on the book that he authored with Anna Palmer. Also, you ought to go and get and read. Thank you, my friend. Coming right back with headlines. Dr. Michael Oren from Israel at the bottom of the hour. Go know where America it is. The Hugh Hewitt Show.
This portion of the Hugh Hewitt Show has been brought to you by MyPillow. Call 800-951-5493 or go to MyPillow.com and be sure to use a promo code HUGH.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Your blood like winter freezes just like ice. And there's a cold and lonely light that shines from you. You wind up like the wreck you hide behind that mask you use. And did you think this fool could never win? Well, look at me, I'm coming back again. I gotta
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt.
And if you need to know while I'm still standing, you just fade away. Don't you know I'm still standing?
I'm back. Gone for 10 days, but I'm back. Coming up after the break, Michael Oren joins me from Israel as the headline of the day in the New York Times, Iraqis rise against a reviled occupier, Iran. The Islamic Republic's heavy-handed intervention in regional affairs have provoked growing resentments, particularly in Shiite-led Iraq. There are millions of people in the streets, all demonstrating against the mullahs. Remember the JCPOA that Team Obama promised us would fix everything? It didn't work. In fact, people hate Iran. Rightly so. The people of Iran hate their government. Everybody hates the mullahs, and except Team Obama. They're still upset we got out of the JCPOA. Other headlines of the morning, 9 members of a Mormon family massacred in Mexico. That's becoming a failed state on our southern border, and Democrats don't want to build the wall. We're out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Good. Finally done. We were paying for everything, getting nothing out of it. It's all about China anyway, and President Xi yesterday endorsed Carrie Lam, the completely clueless, embattled leader of Hong Kong. Apple pledged $2.5 billion to combat California's housing crisis. Have they talked to Tim Sandifer in Arizona? I doubt that they have. Meanwhile, the president went to Kentucky last night. He was very colorful, and I want you to hear this clip, cut number 20.
And we're supporting our police. We're rebuilding our military. We're defeating radical Islamic terrorists like never before. The monstrous animal known as al-Baghdadi is dead. And the man that took his place is dead also. American Special Forces gave the world's #1 terrorist a one-way ticket to hell.
Now, you know, I wanted you to hear that Donald Trump's going to win the election next year. He just is, because the President Obama, who should not have won re-election, but for the intervention of Candy Crowley, wouldn't have won the re-election. Won re-election because he got Osama bin Laden. You heard that last night? That's the line that the president's going to be using from now until the election. However, there may be a war between now and the election, a war between Iran and Israel. I'm going to talk with Dr. Michael Oren after the break about that. Meanwhile, let me do the check of the markets brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com, or Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Andrew and Todd will lend you money. They actually talk to you. They and their team in Southern California do mortgages all over the United States. They have realtors all over the United States. I like to tell people about them. I haven't got any time to do that today, but I will tomorrow or the next day. The fact is that mortgage interest rates are creeping up a little bit. The 10-year Treasury is at 1.79%, still below 2%. You can still get a 30-year fixed in the 3s. If you pay a half a point, you definitely can, and you probably can get it in the 3s even without a half a point. A 15-year, definitely. But that window's closing because it looks like, well, China cut a key interest rate. There is hopes of a trade deal this morning, and Asian markets just are as happy as can be. Japan went up 1.76%. And everything is green right now. Everything is green on the pre-market. After the Dow went up 100 points yesterday, the Nasdaq 46 and the S&P 11. And the good news overnight about China and the U.S. trade negotiations means we'll have another up day on Wall Street, which means another up day on interest rates. But they're so great that you can still get into real estate, buy a second home, buy an investment property, refinance your house now and get money out for college. If you just but call 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. We'll connect you to andrewandtodd.com. The best thing to do is to go to andrewandtodd.com and answer a couple of questions, but don't get left behind, friends, with a high mortgage. Don't waste hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month. andrewandtodd.com. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hugh-niverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hugh-niverse.com.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. As I promised you last night on Twitter, as I've been telling you throughout the show this morning, I wanted to finish the show today, the last half hour on the East Coast, when everyone's stuck in their car on Memorial Bridge, with Israel's former ambassador to this city of Washington, D.C., Michael Oren. Dr. Oren has since then served as the Deputy Minister of Israel. He's out of the government right now. I hope when there's a third round of elections, which loom, that he will actually stand as his own party and someone will finance that so we can get him back into the government. But I'm actually talking to him about his role as a writer this morning. Yesterday in The Atlantic, Dr. Oren penned The Coming Middle East Conflagration, which immediately became the subject of an extended conversation on the Salem Radio Network editorial board call. And I think anyone who concerns themselves with U.S.-Israeli relations, and especially with the state of Israel and its security, will want to go read The Coming Middle East Conflagration, because what it says basically is war. Winter is coming. War is on the horizon with Iran. Dr. Oren, welcome. Good to have you on the show.
Good to be back.
I think it's fair to call you anything but an alarmist, but this article is quite the alarm in the night. Is that fair?
One has to sound that alarm. And I'm not the only one sounding it. I may be the only one sounding it on the pages of the Atlantic, but in closed rooms in the Israel Defense Forces, in our National Security Council, believe me, they're looking at scenarios very, very similar to the one I described in that article of a regional war, which is every bit as big and potentially costly as the 1973 Yom Kippur War.
And that's where I want to begin, not with the hostility. We could begin with a headline from the New York Times this morning about the massive demonstrations in Baghdad against Iran. More pressure on Iran as the Sunni and Shia populations of Baghdad rise up against the regional would-be hegemon. But let's just stick with the obvious part, which is if one of the miscalculations occurs, one of the accidents that often inspire breakout of war happens, and there are many in detail in your article. The first day of full-scale combat looks like what, Michael Oren?
It looks like this. Israel, we don't take credit for this, but Israel acts to prevent Iran from establishing itself militarily in Syria with bases, rocket sites, airfields, in Lebanon, and it has been reported, Hugh, also in Iraq. One of these operations triggers an Iranian response, because Iran feels that there's really no deterrence, and America no longer is standing beside its Middle East allies as it once did, and Iran could get away with striking back. Israel then retaliates, and it snowballs. It mushrooms, whatever metaphor you want. And before you know it, missiles are raining down on the state of Israel. Now, Iran has moved in recent years to surround Israel with a belt of missiles. It's 130,000 rockets in the hands of Hezbollah in Lebanon, missiles in Syria, missiles in Iraq, missiles in Yemen that can reach the state of Israel, and missiles in Iran itself. The IDF estimate is for anything between 1,000 and 4,000 rockets per day. And with all due credit to Iron Dome, and was very proud of having brought the funding from Iron Dome from the United States. It's 90% effective, but for every 100 rockets, 10 are going to get through. But the enemy also has precision-guided rockets that can outfox Iron Dome and hit our airport. It will close our airport. It'll hit our oil refineries, our ammonia factories. It will close down our electrical grids and our major ports through which all of our food is imported. And millions of Israelis will be in bomb shelters. That's on the first day.
And you do then walk through the escalation, but I want to focus on if only 10% of the missiles get through, the casualties in Israel will be unlike any Israel has suffered ever. And the response that would then be obligatory on the IDF and the political leadership, whoever it might be after this ghastly deadlock is over, would also be obligatory. And that raises the question, which I had at the end of reading your piece in The Atlantic, aren't we on the edge of preemptive action by Israel? Don't we have to be?
That begs the question, preemptive action against what and where? Because we are an address, Hugh. Okay, those rockets have an address. To whom do we strike back? The 130,000 rockets in the hands of Hezbollah, for example, are embedded deeply under 200 villages in southern Lebanon. They're in the houses, Hugh. A house has a missile in the living room. The roof opens up. The missile gets fired. If we strike back, we're going to have to strike back at the village and blow up the house with the family in it, which will expose us then on the third day of the war to Security Council condemnations of disproportionality, of war crimes, and the enemy will try to achieve economic strangulation for Israel through blockades and sanctions.
But now, Dr. Oren, just to use a World War II, by the way, if any of you Steelers fans out there don't know, Dr. Oren is an award-winning historian. In World War II, a lot of people grew frustrated, and none more than those in the camps and those who were being hunted, with America going first to North Africa, and then America going to Sicily, and then America going to Italy, and then finally crossing into Northern Europe to drive to Berlin. The problem here is not southern Lebanon. The problem here is Tehran. So when I talk about peremptory action, I'm talking about taking the war to the mullahs, maybe not with missiles, maybe with cyber, maybe with what author Michael Pillsbury calls the assassin's mace that China is developing to use against the United States, any number of technological weaponry that can bring that regime down. Isn't that what has to be being discussed at the highest levels today?
Well, what the Saudis would call cutting off the head of the snake.
Yes.
And I don't think we can rule it out. And the article makes that clear, that eventually, or either in the first phase or in one of the early stages, that we're going to have to direct our defensive message against Tehran itself. And moreover, keep in mind, the Iranians have a missile called the Shahab-3, which can reach Tel Aviv. And they have hundreds of these. So by perforce, we're going to have to react to that. And we can react by various means at our disposal. Israel is a world leader in cyber defense. An interesting statistic, 20% of all the investment in the world in cyber defense is in the state of Israel. So we do have, I think, prodigious capabilities, and we also have conventional capabilities. We're going to have to harness all of these in order to defend ourselves.
Now, in the article, you said the most important question, other than when does the war begin and how does Israel act either before or after day one of a full-scale war, is what will America do? And you're fairly confident we'll do what we usually do, which is resupply Israel with their ammunition, provide legal cover, provide diplomatic support. But the real question is, what will American troops do? And then you raise the question of what about American political leadership? I know where the president is on this. I know where the Secretary of State is. I know where leaders of the defense community like Tom Cotton are. I know the new national security advisor is a strong friend of Israel. If war is going to come, you actually couldn't hope for a better group of people in charge of America's response than are presently at the controls, could you?
You could not, and I do have full faith in them, but the United States and the American people have proven that they are tired of Middle Eastern wars. I've looked very carefully at the response to the president's decision on the withdrawal from Syria, other withdrawals, and the question is, will the American people want to be involved actively in a Middle Eastern conflict? What I mean actively, that is American forces actually engaging in combat for the benefit of an American ally? And that's a very crucial question. And it's a crucial question that Israelis have to ask themselves. And here's a word that doesn't translate very well into Hebrew. What can we bank on? What can we bank on? So in the article I mentioned that there are three traditional areas in which the United States traditionally aids Israel in wartime, as you mentioned, providing us with resupply of ammunition, defending us in the Security Council, for example, and the day after. The United States involved in mediation, troop withdrawals, UN peacekeeping forces. The United States has been instrumental in all these areas, really going back to 1956 to the Suez Crisis. Can
you imagine Israel acting without notifying the United States first that was going to act in a preemptive strike such as 1967 or 1956?
That's an interesting question. It depends on what were the circumstances of that preemptive strike. I think there's a level of trust between the two countries that exists between no two countries in the world, other two countries in the world, and I say that with deep authority. And I think that, generally speaking, Israel has informed the United States of its intentions. We had a very difficult time during the Obama years. I must tell you that when our forces did act against Iran in Syria, and we never took credit for this because we didn't want to push the Syrians and the Iranians in a position where they were publicly embarrassed and they had to react. Every time we acted, the next day it was in the newspaper. Somebody in Washington leaked it.
There are opponents. There are both isolationists inside the Beltway, and there are opponents of Israel inside the Beltway, and there are some in Congress, as you well know. But the question is, do you think the price would be willing to pay if you didn't give this president a heads up, either through this Secretary of State, this National Security Advisor, or one of his good friends, or your ambassador? Ambassador Friedman is very close to the president. Is it worth risking a non-heads up? I don't think so. And I don't
think so either. It's very, very hypothetical. But the nature of our relationship with this administration is so close and so intimate. I think beyond even the unparalleled intimacy of our strategic relationship, our defensive alliance, and this is the deepest and most multifaceted alliance which the United States has had with any foreign power in the post-World War II period. Now it is unprecedentedly deep and multifaceted. That, to me, would suggest that Israel would keep the United States very much informed.
All right, I'll be right back with Dr. Michael Oren. Don't go anywhere except over to The Atlantic to read his article, which I actually will shake you, and it should. When I come back with Oren, again, that's coming up after the break. Don't go anywhere. But if, by the way, let me mention, if war breaks out in the Middle East, you know what's going to happen to the price of gold? I've been telling you gold is at a great entry point. It has been for a couple of months now. Earlier this morning, gold was floating around $1,500, 1,506. I think it might have gone up a little bit since then. The moment the missiles start to fly in the Middle East, gold's going to go through the roof. And that's when you will wish you had gone to HughGold.com. That's posted by Birch Gold Group. Birch Gold Group is the sponsor of this show. Birch Gold Group helps you plan your retirement for tough times and for times of peril, because they move part or all of an IRA or a 401k into a precious metals-backed IRA. Now, you can text 474747, the word Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. That's one way to get their advice on how to do this, and I trust them completely. They are so legit. They are completely in line with being prudent. I'm not talking about going out and buying sacks of gold under your bed, although having some precious metals in a deposit box is a good idea. But diversify. Head over to HughGold.com and click on that button. Get the free 16-page guide to putting part of your IRA or 401k into precious metals. Let them help you at Birch Gold. That's at HughGold.com. HughGold.com. Don't forget as well, I'll hold up for you, ReliefFactor.com. There it is. I took it in the first hour. Now you're looking at it in hour number 3, and I'm reminding you as you head out the door, and I know you're going to head out the door now because you want to listen to Michael Oren, second part. Go back and get your ReliefFactor.com. You might have a long commute this morning. You might have a short one. But either way, you'll be better for it if you have begun your day with ReliefFactor.com. Natural supplements, I've been taking them for years. They've sponsored the show for years. I feel better for years. Yeah, people come up to me, you look great. Yeah, I'm exercising a lot more. I'm walking and running. Not running, trundling, I call it. I'm so slow that bushes are faster than I am. But I'm out there. And I'm out there because, in part, of ReliefFactor.com. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. The 4 natural supplements that every doctor who knows a clue about how the body works tells you you should have, and the right amount, which is what Relief Factor does for you, which is take the guesswork out of supplements. Then we're going down to the GNC and guessing. $19.95 is the starter pack. Give it a try and come right back here. Dr. Michael Oren and I continue our conversation after the break.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. As I said, Dr. Michael Oren is my guest from Israel today. Thank you for joining me early, Dr. Oren. Let me talk to you about what we were saying before the break. If war were to come, the American response. I know the Secretary of State has been over to Tel Aviv very recently. I was there with John Bolton in January. I'm sure the new National Security Advisor O'Brien will be there shortly if he hasn't been there already, and I'm quite certain that the delegations keep coming. Do you think America has any idea of how close to the brink the Middle East is, generally speaking?
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. And our intelligence communities, our militaries communicate continuously again, on a very intimate level. They do. What is unique about this particular moment is the double-edged sword of American involvement in the Middle East. On one hand, this administration has withdrawn from the nuclear accords. It has reimposed punishing sanctions. And the Iranian regime believes it has no choice. It's not going to negotiate under President Trump's humiliating terms, what they see as President Trump's humiliating terms. So the only alternative they have is to be disruptive, is to prove to the United States that it can exact a price in terms of Middle East instability. So they will interfere with shipping in the Gulf. They will send cruise missiles into Saudi Arabia. They will down an American drone. And if that doesn't get the president to lift the sanctions, the Iranians will move against Israel because they know that's a very, very sensitive point. So that creates a situation already where the Iranians are posed to engage in aggression against Israel. But the flip side of this is the meltdown, as they see it, of American deterrence, with the refusal of this administration to react to that attack on Saudi Arabia, at least in a military sense, in a public military sense, to react to the downing of the drone, to withdraw militarily from Syria, and signaling its willingness to negotiate a new nuclear accord. Now, the Iranians see that as weakness, and they feel that they are not being deterred anymore. So they have every interest in going to war, and they have no deterrence preventing them from going to war. So they see it. And that is a very explosive, combustible situation.
They also do not, I believe, in Tehran, what I like to call speak Trump. They don't really understand this president at all. And the fact that he gives you a couple of passes doesn't mean that you get a third. It means, in fact, you won't get a third. I think people should understand that I hope Iran understands that. But here's my bottom line question. I've said, I don't want to embarrass you, but I've said you and Ron Dermer are sort of strategic assets for Israel because you speak the American lingo, as Joe Biden likes to say. Nobody speaks the lingo better than I do. And you can write these articles and talk this way, but unless you get a government that actually has an ability to act, it doesn't much matter. And is there going to be a national unity government, or are we going back to the polls for a third time? And let me add, if that happens, are you going to stand?
I believe there will. I believe that the situation that neither party, neither blue and white or Bigfoot, wants to go to it for a third round. Moreover, there's this worsening strategic situation. The people up top know this, and you don't want to be caught in a war, to say it bluntly, without having a government. And the Middle East is not going to wait while we figure out our political difficulties. So I believe at the end of the day, there will be a national unity government. The big question: who's going to be prime minister first? Because of Prime Minister Netanyahu's legal difficulties, it is imperative that he be first. Because under Israeli law, any minister who is indicted must resign, with one exception, if you're the prime minister. And if you're a prime minister, you can defend yourself while in office. Therefore, Netanyahu will insist on being prime minister first.
So let me close on, what is the reaction to your piece? Because in an ordinary situation, a Benny Gantz or someone like that would say, look, the situation is such, you go first, Netanyahu, then retire, I'll take over, we'll work together, we'll get 5 years of a government, and we'll organize for what is coming. That would be the ordinary situation. Your article would be an accelerant. Is that, in fact, what's happening?
I think that is, in fact, what's happening. I would hope that the administration would table its peace proposal. And this is long awaited, and it keeps on getting delayed, but it's important to table it now, Hugh, because it can serve as a glue. It can serve as sort of a force majeure. The two parties can say, well, we disagree on so many things, but here's an historic opportunity to work with the United States to reach a regional peace agreement. And wouldn't it be tragic, to say the least, to miss this opportunity because of political squabbles?
So by tabling it, let's explain that for the Steelers fans, Michael Oren, you mean publish it and put it out there, whatever its status is, and it had some support in Bahrain, it's got some support among the emerging Entente in the Middle East, but you just mean publish it?
Yes, publish it and follow it up. The Palestinians were rejected because they've rejected every peace or a proposal going back to the 1930s. They actually don't have yes in their vocabulary. But if Israelis accept it, if Saudis accept it, if Bahrainis accept it, we're in a different ballgame, and it will enable all of our regional friends and allies to stand together publicly against Iran, and it will send an incontrovertible message to Iran. So the two the two issues that seemingly are separate, peace and Iran, are actually linked.
Thank you, Dr. Oren, for joining me. We'll push this out far and wide so people pay attention to it. Come back soon and continue to explain. I hope you're right about that unity government. I suspect you're wrong, but I hope you're right. Always a pleasure to talk to you, America. Thank you for listening today. Generalissimo, thank you. Thank you very much. Adam and Ben, talk to you all tomorrow, America, on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.